As the 40s dawned, America was a nation of 132,122,000 people. Minimum wage, 43 cents per hour. If you were born in this decade, you could expect to live for 68.2 years if female and 60.8 if you were a man. Your parents would have been part of what has been called the greatest generation. If you were born in the first part of the decade, you're a war baby. A member of the Beat generation. If you were born in the second half of the decade, you are part of the most significant group of Americans in the 21st century, the baby boomers. Cars were everywhere, and gas cost 15 cents a gallon. The average cost of a new home was $5,600. While only 55% of Americans' homes had indoor plumbing. And America's farmers had to make do without electricity. If you were born in the 40s, your decade began with the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt to an unprecedented third term. The country was isolationist. American workers finally got the 40-hour work week. Nylon stockings went on sale for the first time. And Glenn Miller wrote the decade's signature song, In the Mood. In the 40s, no one event defined the decade more than World War II. A war America was plunged into by a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. A war America won 4 years later in 1945. Victory was celebrated with great jubilation.
The day of days for America and her allies. Crowds before the White House await the announcement from the President that the Japs have surrendered unconditionally.
America was now ready to let loose and enjoy life.
In no country in the world does the average citizen have a greater money investment in his home than in the United States of America. In the number and variety of devices which make for pleasant and comfortable living, the American home surpasses all others. Every year, resourceful industrialists and gadgeteers bestow upon the housewife more appliances calculated to make her work easy and provide leisure for her and her family. But in spending this leisure, many American families like nothing better than to get away as promptly as possible from home and all its comforts. Number one means of escape from the hearthside is the automobile. Number one nighttime amusement is the motion picture. More than 50 million U.S. citizens, regular moviegoers, pay into the nation's box office nearly $2 billion a year. Sports are another favored attraction. Gregarious and uproarious and agreeably sedentary for spectators, they are a welcome refuge to the millions of Americans who would rather be out with crowds of their fellows than cooped up at home. More and more, sports in which amateurs can exhibit their prowess have become a social activity for the whole family. And when the last game is over, the last movie out, the American citizen has a final alternative to home in another currently flourishing institution, the nightclub. Throughout the United States, there are about 70,000 night spots, and today their major problem is less how to attract customers than how to make room for all those trying to get in.
If you were born in the 40s, you welcomed in the first decade of mass communication. 82 of every 100 Americans owned a radio. Celebrities like Jack Benny, Edgar Bergen, and Walter Winchell ruled the airwaves. And your hit parade was king.
Hello.
This is a nationwide radio survey. Were you listening to your radio just now?
No, I am not.
Were you listening to your radio just now?
Why, yes, I am.
To what program are you listening, please?
What program?
There must be some law.
I am the law.
Why, I'm listening to the radio theater.
Of all the peoples of the world, the Americans stand most in fear of a moment's silence. For 82 out of every 100 U.S. citizens, radio provides each day in the year a sure and ever-present escape from their own lives into an ether universe of crackling news, music, costly entertainment, and romantic adventure. In recording U.S. listening habits, often strange and unpredictable, C.E. Hooper has made a profitable business of reporting the public's likes and dislikes to the industry and to the public itself. Hooper ratings, the findings of this nationwide poll, although their accuracy is sometimes questioned, are accepted as convenient yardsticks for sponsors, producers, and performers alike. The survey indicates that the public remains stolidly faithful to the same radio performers year after year. Outstanding example of U.S. listeners' loyalty is Jack Benny, among the first 15 since 1934. To 20 million Americans, listening to the Benny program is a Sunday evening ritual. Consistently high in the public favor, troopers Fibber, McGee, and Molly first brought their homespun humor to the air in 1927.
Show the Tribune my air raid warden's helmet, Molly.
I wouldn't know where to look for it, dearie.
Oh, I know where it is. It's right here in the hall clock.
Oh, no, no.
I gotta straighten out that closet one of these days.
With Americans of all ages, quick-witted Bob Hope has built a solid reputation during the past 12 years as one of radio's top-ranking entertainers. The old comedy art of ventriloquism was brought to a new high level of popularity on the radio by Edgar Bergen, whose assistants, Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snerd, have by now overshadowed their creator as radio personalities.
How does the show look for Sunday, Bergen?
Well, I have part of the script here.
Yeah?
I'm explaining sound waves to you.
You are?
Now, when you throw a stone in a pool, what do you see going in all directions?
Frogs?
No. You saw waves.
Now, don't tell me what I saw. If they weren't frogs, I hope they're croaked.
No. You saw waves.
I not only saw frogs, but I eat them for dinner.
No. What do you think, Bill?
Well, we might tighten it up a little.
Yeah, tighten it up, yeah. And then throw it out.
The only commentator regularly rated in the top 15, Walter Winchell dispenses Broadway gossip, last-minute scoops, and his own highly charged personal opinions on the affairs of the world in a breathless mixture for Sunday night listeners. One of the most adult of the top favorites, veteran showman Fred Allen lampoons any subject, even radio itself.
Tell me, Mr. Moody, what are your feelings about the radio?
I don't hold with it, Bub.
Displeases you?
I don't hold with furniture that talks.
Well, you have a radio.
No, I had one in the hen house.
Yeah?
One day, all the hen's nests would be empty.
Uh-huh.
Next day, every nest would have 2 eggs into it.
You mean?
The hens was listening to Double or Nothing.
Yeah. Oh.
In furnishing the American public its listening fare, the 400 independent stations and the 1,000 network-affiliated stations alike are able to exist for only one reason, the advertising of commercial products. Spending an average $400 million yearly, American industry sponsors more than half of all U.S. radio programs. In putting any program on the air, it is difficult but still necessary to please many people.
Say, instead of that, why don't we have the closet door pushed shut by the cat?
The cat? The sponsor would never go for that. Don't you know he's allergic to cats? And dogs and canaries, for that matter.
Well, how about having the girlfriend stick around till midnight and accidentally push the door shut?
Till midnight? Don't be silly. The network wouldn't let us have the guy and his girl alone in the house that late at night. Why, they're not even engaged. I think you'll like our script for the new show, Mr. Dunham.
If you don't mind, I'd like to hear that commercial first.
Certainly, Mr. Dunham, with pleasure. Girls, will you give us the new commercial? And don't forget that tempo.
Consolidated sardines, America's delight. Have a rich, tangy flavor with plenty of bite. Consolidated sardines are packed twice as tight. So eat consolidated, can't eat consolidated. Treat your stomach right.
That sounds pretty good. But couldn't you work in the name of the product just a little more?
The sponsor exerts virtually complete control over what the public hears, having the power to select the program he wants, to pick the hour for the broadcast, and to eliminate whatever material he dislikes. Yet for every $2 the sponsor spends, the listening public spends $3 on radio sets, repairs, and electric current. And since the airways are considered public property, the Federal Communications Commission is charged with the responsibility of protecting the people's interest. The FCC has the authority to grant or refuse licenses for broadcasting stations, based mainly on available wavelengths. And each 3 years, every U.S. station must apply to the Commission for license renewal. But throughout its 13-year history, the FCC rejected renewal applications only 4 times, while flagrant cases of transgressions against good taste and program balance continued unchecked. Pointing out radio's failure to live up to its obligation to the public, an FCC report indicates that most U.S. stations heavily overload their airtime with commercials. Guilty of such excessive commercialism are the thousands of programs of recorded music, which consume the bulk of airtime on most small stations, and are often sponsored by as many as 15 different products in an hour's broadcast. Depressed by radio's blatant commercialism and appalled by its listening fare is 74-year-old Dr. Lee DeForest, one of radio's inventors.
To the National Association of Broadcasters, New York City. Gentlemen, what have you done to my child, the radio broadcast? He was conceived as a potent instrumentality for culture, fine music, the uplifting of America's mass intelligence. You have debased this child, dressed him in rags of ragtime, tatters of jive and boogie-woogie.
While admitting that there is considerable need for improvement, the industry itself replies that it still sends the public many noteworthy programs, which are too often overlooked in the general criticism of radio. The broadcasters point proudly to their news programs, most popular of any type of radio presentation, allotted 20% of all time on the air. And no other country in the world gives its listeners such complete radio coverage of sports events.
Meeting tonight from New York City. What should we do about Germany now? Meeting tonight!
As an example of radio's commendable features, the broadcasters refer to their discussion programs, where serious controversial subjects are openly debated before a nationwide audience.
First of all, however, Mr. Arnold, you're making me say something that I never dreamed of saying. You're saying that I'm trying under the old leadership to reestablish German industry. My God, I've been living under the Nazis so long that I think I'm a little more allergic to them than you are.
Judge Arnold wants to get in on this here. Judge Arnold? I don't think, Mr. Lochner, that you realize that you're setting up Germany under the old leadership, but that's the tragedy of it. That is what you're doing.
The public, represented by the studio audience, can have an active voice in the discussion.
My question is directed to Mr. Shirer. Mr. Shirer, how can the world be assured of a peaceful Germany?
I think one of our principal problems now in handling the German question is to carry out ruthlessly and honestly our denazification policy.
The networks are proud that they have enabled radio pioneers like Norman Colwyn to present experimental programs in new dramatic forms. The documentary technique has been applied effectively in offering striking broadcasts on subjects of widespread interest. Such documentary coverage from the Library of Congress permitted the public to hear a broadcast at the unsealing of a collection of Lincoln's papers by the foremost Lincoln scholars.
And Mr. Sandberg, in our specific problems of the present time, what do you think would have been Mr. Lincoln's policy and attitude?
We can speculate, guess, surmise on some one dominant quality. I'd say that if today he sat as a counselor of the United Nations, he'd stress above all the quality of patience. Under all shifts of events and changes of circumstance, patience.
Truly great musical talent is available to the U.S. public via radio. Although a relatively small percentage of listeners tune in on classical music, the networks have spent millions of dollars to present artists like Arturo Toscanini, who have been a considerable influence in improving America's musical taste. Among the most articulate of radio's critics is the New York Herald Tribune's John Crosby, whose thoughtful column reflects a tolerant concern for radio's future.
There are more violent extremes of good and bad in radio than any other popular art. The best of it is wonderful. The worst of it is moronic. The trouble is the bad programs outnumber the good ones about 20 to 1. So long as the advertiser runs the show, it'll always be that way. The broadcasters don't own their own souls. There's little hope for radio until they do. Oh, well. Radio's only 27 years old. If it doesn't improve within the next 27 years, it'll be time for all of us to get really angry.
Typical of entertainment which most critics of radio deplore, but the public enjoys, are the many types of audience participation shows.
Now, if you answer this question correctly, madam, you'll win $50. So try hard. Who was the father of our country?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Why, certainly. Who was the father of our country? What is the capital of the United States?
Washington?
Right. Give that lady those 50 crisp dollar bills.
High in the public favor are the elaborate clam bakes in which studio visitors competing for expensive prizes are encouraged to make fools of themselves.
Listen carefully for the animals now. Many queer sounds are heard on a farm. From the barn comes the sound of contented cows. Moo! Quite a while, Mrs. G. To herald the day in his usual way, you'll hear the old rooster say... They missed him. Still doing his best to outdo the rest, the shaggy old dog yelps. Not to be outdone when he sees the sun, the cute little duck goes... To top off the din, all the pigs chime in. And the clear miss. Well, Mrs. Granite, you failed to get him 4 out of 5 times. So, men, who is the better half of the Granites family? Congratulations, Mr. Granite. The title of the better half of the family goes to you, and along with it, that beautiful big radio-phonograph combination. And for being such a good sport, Mrs. Granite, we'd like you to accept this brand new electric washing machine.
Most criticized of any type of program on the air today is the soap opera, which eats up 48% of daylight airtime. To all critics, the radio industry replies that 20 million housewives can't be wrong.
Irene, that's the way it is.
But, John, how could you deceive me like this? Doesn't our marriage mean anything to you?
It's hard for me to say this, Irene, but Eleanor and I love each other.
You should know, Mrs. Black, that love matters more than anything else.
Don't talk to me about love, you vampire.
Irene, we're but straws in the wind. I shall leave you two to talk this out.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Black. There's no use talking. You must give him up.
You dare to talk to me like that, you love thief? Get out of my house. I don't give up this easily, and don't forget it.
Will Irene succeed in recapturing John's love? Will John go back to his job and return to his wife and children? For the answer to these human problems, listen in tomorrow, same time, same station.
Time marches on.
As the decade of the 40s was ushered in, big band music was king. Everybody was out dancing to Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, Duke Ellington, and Benny Goodman. Followed by the first of the modern dancing fads, the jitterbug. The decade ended with bebop jazz, a precursor to rock and roll.
The biggest news of music's boom year of 1943 was made by America's union musicians. As first move in a campaign to share fully in the profits of every commercial use of recorded music, the American Federation of Musicians, an AFL union, forbade its members to perform for any recording company. Mastermind of the Musicians Revolt was James Caesar Petrillo, president of the AFM. who in a few short months found himself the target of an unprecedented barrage of public criticism and became to many the symbol of a labor czar, unbridled and irresponsible. But to the 138,000 members of some 800 local unions over which he had full sway, Petrillo was fighting to remedy an old evil. In the days when there were vaudeville theaters in every town, each with its pit band, there were jobs for thousands of musicians. But vaudeville's decline and the talking picture brought them mass technological unemployment. Once the restaurants and beer gardens of the nation all had their orchestras, but the mechanical jukeboxes drove them out of work, while the making of jukebox records brought employment for only the few hundred men in top name bands. Declaring war upon the radio and recording industries, Petrillo demanded that royalties be paid to a union unemployment fund for every recording sold, and that there be a wider use of flesh and blood musicians in those radio stations which had long depended on canned programs. Fighting these demands, which they feared would put many small radio stations out of business, their united front was finally broken, as all but two of the biggest recording companies agreed to Petrillo's terms.
The recent contracts which we have negotiated with the recording companies will bring into the Federation Treasury approximately $3 million per year. This fund will not be used for any other purpose but for the advancement of musical culture.
In Tin Pan Alley, legendary home of America's tunesmiths, publishers and composers whose incomes had suffered from Petrillo's ban on recordings prepared to catch up with a boom in the music world unparalleled since those flush days of the 20s, symbolized for Broadway by the late, great George Gershwin, who made popular music respectable. Though today the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers is presided over by a man who himself writes long-haired music, the composer and critic Deems Taylor, its main revenues are still derived in war as in peace from the performance of popular songs. And as always, the success of a popular tune depends on the song plugger's ability to wangle it into the repertory of a star, such as radio's Perry Como.
Let's try a few bars of it anyway, Billy, see what happens.
There's nothing more to say. We've had our lovely day and lovely night times two. We loved and lost, dear. What's gone is beyond recall. Still it was better than never to have loved at all.
A popular song is in the money if it reaches Variety's list of the 15 best. But a tune is tops when it can find its way into radio's hit parade, a program which, since America went to war, has reflected radio's desire to gratify the taste of men in uniform.
Put your arms around me, honey, hold me tight, huddle up and cuddle up with all your might. Oh, won't you it starts a-rocking like a motorboat. Oh, I never knew any boy like you.
For the first time, Americans could not only hear their favorite shows, but they could see them in the new media of television. Such was the case with the Lone Ranger and his faithful stallion, Silver.
Fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty Hi-Yo Silver, the Lone Ranger.
This is a story of one of the most mysterious characters to appear in the early days of the West. He was a fabulous individual, a man whose presence brought fear to the lawless and hope to those who wanted to make this frontier land their home. He was known as the Lone Ranger.
And at last, American viewers could see the antics of the hilarious Ed Wynn, who featured guest stars such as Buster Keaton. In the 40s, John Wayne comfortably slid into more mature westerns, such as the 1947 film Angel and the Bad Man.
I had them dead to rights. They got the Baker stage, so I figured I'd watch the ruckus. You down them, I'd hang you. Sorta killing 3 hawks with 1 stone, so to speak. And nothing ever works out right. Well, I missed you getting for it. But I'm patient. It's only a matter of time and I hang you.
Not me, mister. From now on, I'm a farmer.
In the 40s, your parents were the first wave of hysterical fans who swooned over pop idols such as Judy Garland and Frank Sinatra.
I'm so sick of trying. I'm tired of living, but I'm feared of dying. And old man River, he just keeps rolling.
So
Nobody was more suave than Cary Grant.
Well, what are you going to do?
Get the governor on the phone.
I can't.
Why not?
Can't locate him. He's out fishing.
How many places to fish are there?
Well, at least two, the Atlantic and Pacific.
All right, that simplifies it, doesn't it?
Oh,
Get him on the phone.
And tell him what?
Quiet, Duffy. He's thinking.
Tell him if he'll reprieve Earl Williams, we'll support him for senator.
What?
Tell him the Morning Post will be behind him, hook, line, and sinker.
But you can't do that.
Why not?
Because we've been a Democratic paper for over 20 years.
All right, after we get the reprieve, we'll be Democratic again.
Oh,
now, go on, Duffy. Get going. Remember, the Morning Post expects every city editor to do his duty. You two, Louis, get out of here.
Okay, boy.
Walter, I see you're still at it.
It's the first time I ever double-crossed the governor. What can I do for you?
Well, would you mind if I sat down?
There's been a lamp burning in the window for you, honey. Here.
Oh, I jumped out that window a long time ago, Walter.
And of course, Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff haunted your parents' nightmares.
What are you doing here?
I found out there were some important papers in that safe.
So?
I thought you should have them. I wanted to get them for you.
Mademoiselle will pardon when I need help. I ask for it. You go back upstairs.
I'm sorry, you misunderstood.
Go at once.
In the 40s, the big stories in American science and technology were the invention of plastics and the transistor. The 1940s invention of the transistor transformed electrical power. Smaller and more efficient, the transistor allowed manufacturers to remake the American home for consumers.
With the shortage of domestic help, labor-saving kitchens are the plan of the future. Dorothy Carless, the well-known singer, and her musician husband, Eugene Peeney, have decided that their dream kitchen will be an all-electric affair. Whether it's cooking or any other domestic task, all the drudgery will be taken out of it in the home of tomorrow by a simple turn of a switch. No hard labor about this kitchen. None of those back-breaking jobs that made the old-fashioned home a place of slavery. And the food can always be relied on to keep fresh in the refrigerator. A great help when you don't want to go through the business of shopping each day. An electric washer takes away that Monday morning feeling where housewives are concerned. No more rubbing boards and washerwoman's hands when a gadget like this can do it all for you. And when it comes to mangling, there's none of that arm-aching business of pushing round the old handle, trying to squeeze the washing through the rollers by brute force, and often putting your fingers through as well. When the washing's done, this electrically heated cupboard cuts out the old game of hanging the clothes round the kitchen fire, keeping all the heat from you so that you slowly freeze. The hot air grating gets the drying done quickly and keeps it out of the way.
Like transistors, plastics changed America.
Hey, what gives here? Shower-proof dresses? Putty that bounces? What is this? Silicones are a remarkable recent development, a great step forward in the science of chemistry. Now, the atoms that make up all materials are so infinitesimally tiny that even with man's most powerful microscope, they cannot actually be seen. But for illustration, we can join certain atoms together to form a typical or symbolized molecule of the kind that makes up the ordinary organic substances we've known and used for many years. Notice that the carbon atom forms the backbone of these ordinary materials. One form of carbon is coal, and coal, of course, burns very easily. So when science wanted to find new synthetic materials that would have the desirable properties of older materials, but would not burn easily, they made use of common sand, the silicon and oxygen that makes up more than 3/4 of the Earth's crust. So by replacing the carbon atoms in our typical molecule with silicon atoms, an entirely new field of industry was created, with a basic chemistry all its own, the silicones industry. But eventually the materials come out ready for further processing into many forms of silicone products: oils, resins, greases, rubber, molded plastics, complex compounds for making life simpler. Because silicone fluid, for instance, will withstand a lot of heat, it makes possible a dependable lubricant for the automatic cooking timer and for the clock on the range. Because it stays resilient under extremes of heat and cold, silicone rubber makes a better gasket for use on a pressure cooker. And it's used to cushion and weather strip this double-glazed window. And here, at long, long last, is the very peak of modern progress. Oops, has this ever happened to you? Especially in those quaint, slant-floored old tea rooms where George Washington did practically all of his sleeping? Well, finally, the era of the rickety, tippy tea table is over, thanks to a new furniture leveling device in which a simple spring and a little cup of silicone putty automatically level any piece of furniture. Now, even in those adobe lunchrooms in the West, the kind where you get red-hot chili and chili red-hots, your table will stand staunch, well-balanced, firm, and graceful. Another silicone fluid is now being used to reduce vibration in automobiles by serving as a viscous or fluid damper on the crankshaft of the engine. In the world of sport, a new silicone center is being put into golf balls. This new center, along with a new type of winding, will add distance and bounce and bound to your... Well, anyway, a silicone-centered ball will give you a little more yardage. Another form of the material can be used to improve windshield visibility and to repel water and moisture on camera lenses and other optical equipment. The silicones have brought improvements in the field of medicine, too. Because the inside of this hypodermic syringe has been silicone treated, the clotting time of the blood sample is extended, so better blood tests can be made. And the so-called bouncing putty is valuable in therapeutics. And so, although life's little annoyances will probably go on happening at just the wrong moments, the silicones may well bring us new ways of overcoming them, as well as new comforts and conveniences we haven't even thought of yet. For just as the chemistry of carbon has brought us almost limitless progress, so does the chemistry of silicon promise us a fascinating and eventful excursion in science, a science of new opportunity and achievement. The science of the silicone.
With the war over, if you were born in the 40s, your parents, for the first time since the Roaring 20s, could buy luxury items and a bevy of clothes. Through advertising, Mom was introduced to a whole new collection of beauty items.
In the past 4 years, some 6 million American men have seen more of the women of foreign lands than they have of their own American sisters, wives, and sweethearts. In England, Italy, France, and even conquered Nazi Germany, they have been able to observe at first hand and to admire a type of beauty rarely seen on Main Street. But as Europe recedes in memory, the soldiers' thoughts turn home again.
Where was this Pete?
She lived on a farm near Munich.
Not bad for a German girl.
Yeah, she's okay. There's a picture of my girl from home.
Say, she's all right.
I haven't seen her in 3 years. I wonder what she looks like now.
But while their men have been away, American women have not been standing idly by. And the first sight that the returning veteran sees should banish any doubts he may have as to the attractiveness of American girls. For while the veteran has been fighting on foreign fronts, American women have been carrying on a secular struggle of their own at home, the age-old battle for beauty.
In our desire to be beautiful, to have poise, to be well-groomed, whether we run a household or tend a machine in a factory, we women are just being women. But in America, we think we have a little head start on the women of other countries because we believe that the basis of beauty is health, and that health comes from a combination of sunshine, fresh air, and exercise. Of course, we've all been told you can't buy beauty in a bottle or jar. But the American girl from 13 to 70 spends $1 billion, that's $1,000 million every year, trying to prove that that old adage is the bunk. We have the money to spend, and we want all the lovely smelling soaps, lotions, and glamour goo we can get with it. And even if we didn't have all that money we're spending now, we still have to have those soul-satisfying scents and these elevating elixirs. What we pay for our cosmetics is simply an index to our tastes, our pocketbooks, and our environment. Our egos are best nourished by a well-placed investment in real luxury goods, what you might call discreetly conspicuous waste. But in any store in America where a woman might go to buy a turnip or a tumbler, there's always something for sale to make her more beautiful.
My hair curls just like natural when I take off the curler. 2 for 15 cents, and half a dozen will make you look like you dreamed about. You can be beautiful for less than half $1. Go to bed and wake up surprised. It's real magic. 2 on a card for only 15 cents.
Today, the American beauty business is one of the largest consumer service industries in the country. Cosmetic manufacturers produce almost $500 million worth of merchandise during the war in spite of all restrictions. And with the coming of peace, their output has risen steadily. In an industry as highly competitive as cosmetics, smart packaging is half the sales battle. For most women are attracted as much by the package as by the product. The makers of toilet goods spend over $50 million a year in advertising to give their products the right suggestion of allure and luxury. Advertising artists, like the famed Eric, who have mastered the glamorous style, can write their own ticket.
What beauty care means to a woman's morale was discovered in American war plants. Even shipyards had to install beauty shops for their girl workers. Efficiency went up 10 to 15%, and absenteeism went down. When a woman looks her best, she is likely to do her best, whether at work or at play. The big stores and smart shops have us thoroughly sold on the idea of individuality in our cosmetics, such as specially mixed face powder. It costs more, of course, but we can be sure it's just for us. To acquire a well-shaped mouth, we sometimes need an expert's artistic touch. And every woman has her troubles with mascara. Massage comes ace high on the list of every beauty seeker who can afford it. Then there are sprays to relax the skin or to tighten it, exotic vapors and rays for wrinkles, and the face mask and bubble bath combination that makes you feel you are really the answer to a millionaire's prayer. For girls who get combat fatigue in the struggle, there are places in the country where the idea is just relax and let nature do the rest.
Ladies, we believe the path to beauty is by rest, complete relaxation. We have nothing to sell at Sunshine Terrace but rest. It is better if you do not call your husband or sweethearts on the phone or have any other emotional experience that will upset your complete relaxation. Rest, and the rest comes easy. Are we agreed?
Beauty begins at home for the determined housewife who doesn't mind what the family thinks when she strikes a beauty-building pose.
What happened to Mommy?
There's one thing every woman wants, and it's awfully hard to get and awfully easy to lose. I mean a good figure. A perfect figure is something that very few of us ever achieve. But even good lines are helped and preserved by a nice, snug little girdle. Now that the war is over, doesn't that two-way stretch feel good? For some of us, it's just a bit too late. There's no way to lick inflation when it goes too far. But a girl with any real spirit will throw herself wholeheartedly into the battle of the bulges. And for her, there are gymnasiums. Our gyms are different. If you don't mind a mauling, you don't have to work. The machines do everything. They beat you and knead you and pummel you and shake you. You just have to be able to take it. If machine age methods don't do the trick, there is always something more aesthetic.
Now let's do the rocking exercise to reduce the hips, buttocks, and thighs. Watch it first, please. Right, left, let's begin. And over. Keep the body high. Now let's do the exercise for slimming the waist with live line above the head. Travel forward, 10 counts forward, 10 back. Let's begin. And
when you've mastered the rhythms of the rumba, you're well on your way to glamour. But all is lost if you can't find the right hairdresser. Any girl can find a good husband. But getting the right man to do your hair, that's a real problem.
In her constant battle for beauty, the American woman has the advantage of the latest weapons science has to offer and the newest methods of highly specialized practitioners. For American cosmetologists have been quick to adapt to the beautification of women theories and practices which have been evolved in other more serious branches of science. Yet if, in spite of all these weapons and all the skilled professional aid she can mobilize, woman never wholly wins her battle against the inevitable inroads of time, it is not for lack of courage in the fight. With her vanity driving her, she will never give up.
For men, the story wasn't much different. They, too, were interested in looking good and feeling good.
Today, less than ever before, is vanity a feminine monopoly. In the United States alone, there are 120,000 beauty shops for men, as against a mere 83,000 for women. The fact that these establishments are called barber shops instead of beauty parlors doesn't mean a thing. Hardly a man would dare walk out of one of them with just a shave or a haircut. He buys face creams, lotions, suntans, and hair restorers. He gets fussed over and pampered and flattered and catered to for the same reason women do, because it makes him feel good. $300 million a year are spent by the male population of the United States on this sort of thing. Yet they dare accuse the American woman of vanity. In the eternal battle for beauty and youth, America's men and women stand shoulder to shoulder. But the men, the poor dears, do they ever win?
All right, Mr. Van Voorhees?
Well, time marches on.
The decade of the 40s was the decade of mom's apple pie, hot dogs, and baseball. Stan Musial, Joe DiMaggio, Hank Greenberg, and Ted Williams were the heroes of the time. And Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. In football, there was no finer game than Saturday afternoon on college campuses across the country.
71,000 see some blazing football at Champaign as Illinois meets Michigan. Edelman's long punt soaring far down the field is caught on Michigan's 26 by Elliott, who heads for the Illini goal line, cutting along just inside without a hand laid on him, and the Wolverines, favored for the Rose Bowl, nail down the first score of the game. Illinois goes into action with Steger carrying the ball through center, cutting down the Michigan defense and sliding through to get away for 53 yards, landing on the Michigan doorstep. It takes 5 more plays, but Steger finally corkscrews over for Illinois. With the first half not yet finished, Chapius heaves one for the Wolverines. It's snapped by Elliott, who streaks away for a gain that's good for 52 yards. He winds up on the 4, but a penalty brings it back to the 9. From here, Fondy crashes over. Michigan 14, Illinois 7.
46,000 packed the Cotton Bowl in Dallas for a battle of undefeated grid giants, Southern Methodist and Texas. Page of SMU electrifies the crowd with his run back of the kickoff. The Mustangs of Southern Methodist came into this game underdogs, but they're top dogs right at the start. Page's long run puts his team deep in Longhorn territory, and it's finally Mr. Page himself who puts Texas on the Longhorns of a dilemma. 6 points worth. He skirts left end for the game's first touchdown. After Texas ties the score, the Mustangs do it again. Johnson fires a long pass, 45 yards to the Texas 20, where Walker grabs it and races all the way to the 1 before being knocked out. From here, McKissick goes deep in the heart of Texas for another Methodist score. Bobby Lane, the Texas quarterback, keeps the Longhorns stampeding with his passing arm. Blount takes this one for a nice gain in the 4th period. And Lane connects again to put Texas within inches of a tie score. His pass to Guillory is good for 6 points, but Southern Methodist wins 14-13.
Georgia Tech's Engineers and Duke's Blue Devils tangled in the rain at Atlanta before 38,000. Tex Bowen picks up 7 yards around end just after the start of the first quarter, and from there on it's short and sweet for the Engineers. On the next play, Still passes 10 yards to Dink Bowen, who's knocked out of bounds, but it takes Tech just 6 minutes of game time to run up the only touchdown today, with Still spiraling to George Broadnax over the line. Battling a top favorite Notre Dame squad at Cleveland, a plucky Navy team runs into a series of costly fumbles after 12 minutes of tight defense. Then Irish siege gun Johnny Lujak gets loose and shoots one 29 yards to Brennan that's good for the first Notre Dame score. The fireworks are enjoyed by 84,000 who watch Navy fight courageously against the nation's top team. Lujak sees no chance of passing and takes off from his goal line on a beautiful long run, streaking down the field through the midshipmen for 78 yards, but rams into trouble and the ball is knocked from his grasp to end one of the most sensational runs of the day. Navy manages to out-fumble the Irish, and it's Notre Dame's ball when Hawkins loses the old pigskin on the sideline. Once more, Notre Dame is in scoring position, and this time it's Trapuka passing for the Irish almost into the end zone, into the nimble mitts of Leon Hart. Final, Notre Dame 27, Navy nothing.
Popular culture in the 40s introduced the bikini. And the biggest change of all? Cars. Millions of cars. Suddenly, the entire country was on the move. They wanted to see their country to take long-needed vacations of every sort. It was a whole new industry.
After 4 years of war, which made travel all but impossible, the long deserted highways of the United States are once more alive, and the most tourist-minded people in the world are again on the move. From one end of North America to the other, the tourist industry is making ready for a return of the good old days.
The St. Louisan leaving 12:55, Whiskey, track number 12. Passengers for Columbus, Dayton, Richmond, Indiana.
Deep in the American's heart is the urge to be on the move. There isn't a train he wouldn't take, no matter where it's going. That's what a poet said. And when a citizen is vacation bent, he has to remember that trains have a way of leaving on time.
St. Louis, Cincinnati, Lexington, Louisville. This section has coaches, dining car, Pullman cars, 330, 331.
For every American with a holiday in mind, a huge industry lies in wait, ready to transport him on a magic carpet of dollar bills, 11 billion of them last year, by air to Gay Paris, on a slow boat to Casablanca, or to float him down the river, down to New Orleans. Though the ocean cruise business fell off to nothing during the war years, today it is booming again. Vacationists have plenty of money, plenty of places to go, and plenty of worries to get rid of. Trade follows the sun, and on land as on sea, there is a concerted rush to the mañana republics of Latin America, good and hospitable neighbors. But many Americans believe that whether it's worry or money you want to get rid of, no place beats Florida. If you can stand the big touch, a yacht is the thing. For a few $1,000s, for a few weeks, you can wear dungarees and do your own mending. The rarely rugged yachtsmen actually go to sea and make the run to Nassau across the warm Gulf Stream. Nassau occupies a special place in American affections. During Prohibition, this was where the liquor came from. And after his abdication, this was where the Duke of Windsor went as governor of the Bahamas. Today, the U.S. tourist is never troubled by the sight of any undue exertion. But for all their languid enchantment, the Caribbean and the sunny South hold no thrill for the hardier breed of winter vacationist. For him, the northern states and Canada's Laurentians are tops. With thousands of slat-happy visitors to the pratfall belt, he learns the art of the stem and the Christie. The air is cold and dry, the hotels warm and fashionable. Even a greenhorn looks good in the costume, and your troubles don't begin until you start downhill. To get their visitors to the top of the mountains down which they are expected to slide on their own, resort owners have spared no expense in ski lifts. For a modest fee, you're up. Then it's your own technique that gets you down.
If you make it to the bottom of the hill, and most do, you can call yourself a skier. And when you've had enough, the lodge is waiting to cheer you with a nice cup of tea. The social life of winter resorts is cozy, for half the time is spent getting warmed up after a healthy chill. When the skating rink is not too far from the hotel, as in New York's great Catskill resorts, no guest need risk pneumonia. 3 turns around the ice give a brisk preparation for cocktail time and the social amenities of the crowded evening. The hotel's nightclubs bring to the snow-clad hills the familiar atmosphere and all the glitter of Broadway. The wisecracks of comedians, like the raconteur Red Buttons, never fail to click.
But have you watched kids lately? No kidding. Have you watched them grow up? They're soft inside. They got nothing. Kids are crazy nowadays. Everything is psychology, psychology. Kid burns down a living room. They say, don't touch him. That's initiative. And I want to tell you, grandparents, they're worse than anybody else. They spoil those kids like mad. I went to see the nephew, 4 years old, my mother and dad last week. All day long, they stood around yelling, look at that boy. Look at that boy he's doing. Look at that boy he's doing. What do you think the boy was doing? Sawing a dog in half. But there's always a little compensation. Today we have the Freedom Train. That's the train that runs from New York to Reno. And I want to tell you, I think it's about time the kids in our country really got a good look at the documents handed down by our forefathers. I never knew anything about history or documents when I was a kid. I remember one day in class, my teacher said, Buttons, who shot Lincoln? I said, I didn't do it. She said, what kind of an answer is that? You bring your father to school tomorrow. Next day, my father came to school. And she said to my father, she said, Mr. Buttons, I asked him who shot Lincoln, and he says he didn't do it. My father said, teacher, my boy's an honest boy. If he says he didn't do it, he didn't do it. Later on that night, my father got a hold of me. He said, hey, kid, tell the truth. Did you do it?
But for most Americans, vacation time is summer. And summer means a well-earned rest. July and August, bringing the dog days to most of the United States, are the time when the hardest boss must relent. And even the biggest corporation shows its thousands of employees that it has a heart. The danger of a quiet vacation spent at home is familiar to married men, who inevitably find themselves put to work under enlightened supervision. Thus, the call of the great outdoors becomes irresistible. The chance to withdraw a little from home and civilization, and to become, for a time, almost self-sufficient. But to go camping with a few cronies, or to get away to his favorite haunt for a little trout fishing, the married man must also plan a vacation for his children. Camps for boys and girls of every age flourish, teaching them group living and how to get along without mom and pop. But many gregarious families choose to spend their summers together in busy bungalow colonies at the lake or at the seashore. The percentage of America's 21,000 miles of seacoast not given over to lawful enterprises of skill and chance, where every contestant is guaranteed a prize, is still available to provide healthy, happy holidays for young and old in surroundings conducive to exercise and early rising. Sun and air relax the adult population and teach both children and parents the joys of outdoor play together. For those who really love adventure and the rugged life, few resorts can match the Dude Ranch. Here, after a hard day in the saddle, the tenderfoot takes his fun in a setting right out of frontier days. Under the wrangler's watchful eye, dudes remount their favorite cayuse. As they leave the old corral and hit the trail again, they feel they are a part of the Old West, though still east of the Hudson. It is the huge resort hotel which is the best bet for the city dweller who is looking in the country for the same amusements he has in town, but with fresh air and sunshine added. Operating on a country club basis, but often accommodating more than 1,000 guests at a time, such resorts welcome back many of the same people year after year. Top factors in holding trade are the quality and abundance of the food served. But if meals are the management's first concern, its second is to provide a continuous whirl of recreation. But all vacations of young or old, rich or poor, have to end at last. And America once more starts moving back from the mountains, the lakes and the seashore, to the workaday world.
Fun. You must keep in touch with each other.
Don't forget.
Let's get together real soon.
Gee, it was swell.
Yes, next year, surely.
You will write, won't you?
It was fun.
Time marches on.
For the first time, as the decade ended, Americans felt the stress of modern life and developed a whole new industry to deal with it.
Master of the sky above and the earth beneath, modern man applies his utmost ingenuity and inventiveness to the pursuit of speed and comfort in search for his most deeply desired objective, happiness. He has surrounded himself with ever more complicated mechanisms to reduce mental and physical effort to a minimum. Man is ever employing his vast scientific resourcefulness for the creation of entertainment devices to provide him with constant distraction. Year by year, the number of appliances and gadgets contributing to man's convenience multiply around him. But despite all the mechanisms he has invented in his pursuit of personal happiness, man is finding existence in the modern world full of frustrations and vexations. Today, the machines man has invented to conquer his environment seem themselves to be conquering man.
Driver! Driver! I have to be at Penn Station at 3:30 and it's 20 after now.
Listen, lady, I can't pick up this cab and carry it, can I?
How dare you speak to me that way? You're the most...
In the calm of America's universities are many thinkers who, pondering the pressure of today's mechanized world, are seriously concerned with the effect of modern living upon mankind. Among them is Professor Ernest Albert Hooton of Harvard, eminent anthropologist, whose studies of the human race from the Stone Age to the present have left him totally unimpressed by recent technological advances, and none too hopeful of the prospects for happiness of the tottering biped known as man.
It took millions of years for man to evolve from a super ape into a thinking animal. But during the past 30,000 years of increasing gadgetry, man has backslid, mentally and physically. Technology perfects machines that even feeble minds can operate. The unintelligent user of gadgets still retains the mentality of primitive man. He resorts for moral support to mumbo-jumbo, just as did his savage ancestors. Machines get better and better, illogical beliefs persist. Mechanized and moronic man moves toward extinction. Any questions?
Corroborating Dr. Hooton is the American press, where reports of the current trend toward mental disorders and crimes of violence testify that man is far from happy. 1 out of every 10 Americans is due for a nervous breakdown. 1 American in every 200 is now a patient in a mental hospital. The great variety of popular books on mental problems bears witness to the everyday American's troubled state of mind. Among the commonest worries of most people is the problem of how to succeed in one's job. No less urgent to the average man or woman is the problem of how to attract the opposite sex. Faced by these and other problems, troubled people have always turned to the traditional counselors, the family doctor, experienced and reliable, the school teacher, instructor of the young, the man of God who ministers to the spirit, and the elders of the family group. The addiction of Americans to food fads as a means of bolstering themselves up has enabled many a diet theorist to build his private formula into a flourishing business.
I use liver, brain, spinal cord, heart, kidney, mixed to juices of raw vegetable that fixed up gray hair, wrinkles, bad teeth, sagging chin, brittle nails. If somebody has sex problem, your worries are over.
But the currently popular health theorist has by no means crowded out the colorful medicine man, with his nostrums guaranteed to cure every ill and solve every problem.
Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and see how Dr. Mayfield's famous Vitazone remedy works. Carrying his germ-destroying properties to every corner of the human system, ridding it of impurities, Dr. Mayfield's wonderful Vitazone remedy brings a new spring to your walk, new life to your weary-jaded eyes, and a ruddy glow of health to your pale cheeks. Only $1 a bottle, my friends, for Dr. Mayfield's Vitazone, surpassing all the medical specialists in all the hospitals of the globe. Who's going to be the first to buy a wonderful bottle of Vitazone? Oh, I see a fine, intelligent young gentleman there. Oh, thank you, $1. Who's going to be the second?
With unflagging optimism, man has been buying potions and pills for centuries, forever sure that a miraculous solution of all his problems is just around the corner. Another means of self-improvement, mail-order courses in muscle building have for years enjoyed a phenomenal success. From offices which cover a whole floor in a New York skyscraper, strongman Charles Atlas operates $1 million business. From all over the world pour in the inquiries of clients young and old, all of whom are ambitious to achieve a torso like Atlas's.
Why, only the other day, a very rich man called me up and said, "Charlie, I have just lost $500,000. I'm going to blow my brains out." So I told him to forget it and get to exercising. Let me teach you how to become strong, like this.
Today, some doctors have grave reservations as to the value of exercise for everybody. Prominent among them is Dr. William H. Sheldon, noted authority on the human constitution.
For some people, physical culture is a good thing. For some others, it may be disastrous.
But despite wise counsel, millions of men and women continue to search for happiness, each in his own strange way. Ever seeking to win the admiration of others, never daunted by his previous failures, man is forever sure that next time he'll hit the jackpot. Part and parcel of every man's spirit of hope is his immemorial desire to know what the future holds in store. Upon fortune tellers and fortune-telling devices, the American public spends some $150 million a year. The fact that the same person may hear 3 or 4 contradictory versions of the future from as many practitioners seldom does anything to shake her faith in the ancient arts of soothsaying.
Now here's your heartline. Well, you certainly get plenty of attention from the wolves, don't you?
Bad confluence is looming up next year. Do not swim in the ocean. That would be fatal. Moon and Pluto in the air sign Gemini. Your love life's not very satisfactory, is it?
Naturally, you've had bad luck with a name like Ruth Farrell. The letters don't coincide with your astral influences. Now, if you'll change your name to this one I've worked out for you, you'll be in tune with the infinite, and all your problems will vanish.
What's my new name?
Your new name is Cricora Roval.
From among primitive evidences of human irrationality, even the sardonic Professor Houghton is not completely pessimistic.
People who consult mystics, diviners, and prophets of the occult employ the same sort of subhuman reasoning as produced these masks and magical paraphernalia.
You seem to take a very dim view of humanity, Professor Houghton. Haven't you any hope for the future of man?
Certainly. But we must realize that we need not merely better machines and sounder beliefs, but wiser and healthier men. When we have learned what qualities of mind and body combine in heredity to make superior individuals, we may then produce intelligent human beings who will ultimately salvage civilization.
Bolstering up the scientists' hope, a National Committee of 13, with a campaign of good-humored burlesque to expose the baselessness of humanity's fears and phobias, is trying to prove on a popular level that superstition can be eradicated. Backed by people as well known as illustrator John Vassos, the committee feels it may, in time, get mankind to substitute logic and common sense for its eternal wishful flight from reality. To educate by example, these iconoclasts publicly violate all the time-honored taboos. For with the scientists, they believe that until men learn that their future lies in themselves, not in cults or charms or mumbo-jumbo, the security and happiness men have sought down the ages will still elude them. Time marches on.
The decade of the 40s closed with the debut of Rodgers and Hammerstein's epic musical South Pacific on Broadway. The first Polaroid instant camera was sold. Mule Train by Frankie Lane was the country's #1 song.
Mule train,
Clippity-clopping through the wind and rain. They'll keep going till they drop.
The first VW Beetle, the people's car, was sold.
Refining this car, not necessarily to keep in style with it, but to make a better car, which means to all of you...
Of all the promises made at the 1949 Auto Show, we at Volkswagen kept ours.
The Berlin Airlift, the largest peacetime airlift of supplies in the world, ended. A Democrat, Harry Truman, was president. And he led America into becoming the world's first superpower. So, if you were born in the 40s, you became the Beat Generation. And the baby boomers that would redefine America forever.